Hi, my name's Kellie from Codebots, and I built a wiki in an hour that allows you to create, modify, update, and read articles. Keep watching to see how I did it. Hello, Kellie here from Codebots, and today I'm going to demonstrate the power of Codebots by creating a wiki application through a combination of bot-written code and custom code. First thing I'm going to do is create a new Codebots app. I'm going to select a custom app, and I'm going to select the bot that produces a Spring Boot server-side and an Angular client-side. I'm going to call this example wiki. And given I'm only working on this by myself at the moment, I'm going to select to start building the app straight away. Awesome. So now I've got a blank canvas. What I'm going to do before I take it any further is actually just jump back in and have a look at what I'm trying to achieve today. So jumping into the plan section here, you can see that I've got two primary user groups: visitors, which they're allowed to read articles. I've got publishers, which are the main admins of the application that can create, read, update, and delete. And then finally, of course, we've also got some of the functionality around how you interact or view articles. So they can be searched. They can also be written in Markdown. And we also have two lists, first one being updated and second one being featured articles. So now we see what we are actually trying to achieve here today. I'm going to get started on my diagram. So jumping back over here, I want to create two entities. First entity is going to be my article. This article entity is going to have a couple of different attributes. First couple are going to detail or metadata around the article itself. For example, title. The title of the article. I'm going to mark this one as searchable and unique, and I'm going to add a required validator. Second attribute is going to be summary. The summary of the article. I'm going to mark this one searchable, but I'm going to omit the unique attribute validator here because I may want to have similar articles or same articles with same summaries, but I will mark it as required. Adding my second last attribute here is going to be the article content, which is the content of the article. I'm going to mark this one as searchable, and I'm going to mark it, give it the value of long text here for the database type, and I will mark it as required as well. And now my final attribute is going to be a Boolean and featured. This featured attribute is going to let me pick whether or not an article is featured. Now, my second entity here, given the fact that users are unauthenticated if they're marked as visitors, I don't need to create an entity for them, but my publishers do need to log in to be able to make changes. So I'm going to make this one my publisher entity. And I'm going to give it the user behavior. Wonderful. Jumping over to my interface diagram, I'm going to add two pages. The very first page is going to be my home page. And I'm going to mark it as such. I'm going to add two CRUD tiles, one for each of my new my lists that I want to present on the CRUD tile, on the front end, sorry. And the first one is going to be featured articles. Link it to my article entity. Second one's going to be recently updated. And again, I'm going to link it to my article entity. My second page is going to be a list of articles. So I'm just going to call that articles. Given it isn't the home page, I'm going to omit selecting it as such. And then adding another CRUD tile here. Again, linking it to articles. Jumping across into my security, we've got, we want our publishers to have access to everything. So I'm going to mark all permissions for them, including the administration panel. Visitors, we don't want them to have access to everything, but I will give them read access to the home page, the articles page. I also want them to be able to read articles. Now that I've set that, I'm going to hit the build button. So now that we're starting the build, those diagrams I just created are being handed over to the bots, and they're starting to write. We will see the bot start to write in just a moment. So what we can see here is the bots running around creating the files on our file system. As you can see, the number of files have now climbed to 691 individual files with 95,000 lines of code. We'll just wait for one more moment while this finishes. Given the fact I'm going to be customizing code today, I'm not going to hit the preview app button, but if we wanted to see the app running just as it is now, I could click this one. So I'm going to jump over to the Git. Beautiful. You can see our project here. So first up, we've got a set of shortcuts. Today, I'm going to be running the application locally without Docker, but if you wanted to get a quick start Docker application up and running, we do have a series of shortcuts in here for each operating system. Inside the client-side directory, you will have your Angular application. Models will be just serialized models of what we just created just now. And the server side here, of course, will be our Spring application. This test target will be our Selenium automation tests. And then we've got a README here with some more details. I'm going to jump straight to it and clone this down. Just checking I've got my source code all here. Got test, client-side, domain, models, server-side, and shortcuts. Wonderful. First things first, we've got to set it up so I can actually run my application using both Node and Java Spring. So I'm going to install this client. What I'm doing here is just simply running a yarn install inside the target application client-side directory. While that is starting, I will also install the server. This is doing essentially the same thing, but simply doing it with Gradle instead. So the server's finished. I might as well get that started. I will be running this in a test profile today. What that means is it will be using an embedded database. The benefits of using an embedded database is that I don't need to have an external database ready to go for the development. Downsides, of course, is my data will not persist across application restarts. Client side is installed. Let's have a look, see where we're at with running it. This is using the Angular CLI to start this application, and we'll wait for a moment for this to finish. Okay, it looks like our client side has started. Let's jump over and have a look. Okay, cool. We've been presented with a login page here. So I'm going to log in as my publisher. And I'm going to use the example password of example. Password. What we can see here now in front of us is the two CRUD tiles we placed on the home page. The first CRUD tile at the top is going to be our featured articles, and the CRUD tile underneath is going to be our recently updated articles. Right now, these are both identical. We are using the same functionality for both, so there's a lot of reuse and a lot of sharing. We will be customizing these in a moment. Jumping over to our article page here, again, reusing the same CRUD tile for the article page. This will just be a list of articles. Given the fact I am logged in as a publisher, I do have access to the administration panel. What I can see in here, I can manage my users, so I can create, delete, update users. In this case, we've only got publisher users available. I can also manage my articles from the administration section as well. So this is, again, using very similar views. What I can actually see here as well is I do have access to a couple of different features here. So GraphQL, for example, if I open this one up, Voyager and Swagger. So these are all the APIs that have been produced by the bot so far. In Swagger, you can see I've got an article controller for the article entity I just created, and then I've got my user management controllers that I got by adding that user behavior. Looking at Voyager, I've got similar functionality, but I've got it through our GraphQL API. If I wanted to test this out, I can, of course, use the GraphQL interface here to do some querying. For example, if I wanted to create a query, I simply just start typing here. To account, and at the moment I can't see any articles at all because I haven't created any yet. Jumping back over to our code, let's actually create some test data because that was looking pretty bare. I'm going to jump into my server-side directory, source, main, Java, And underneath the configuration directory, I'm going to create a new package called data. Inside of this, I'm going to create a new file called test data. Okay, so using the snippet that I've actually prepared beforehand, I'm going to make sure I update my package names. So my packages here are using example wiki. I'm going to copy this across. And I'll explain how this is working. First of all, this is a injected component using Spring Boot. We are running it using the dev and test profile, so this will not run in an application production context. We're using the application runner interface. So what that actually allows us to do is, as long as we implement this run app, this will start on application starter. Our anonymous helper here allows us to bypass some of our security rules to inject data directly into our database. First of all, you'll see that I've created a title, a summary, and then a block of content. I am then going to be injecting this 20 times with various minor variations in between. Realistically, you probably want to enter real data into this system to test it out thoroughly, but for today's demonstration and example, we just want to fill it up. Now that we've done that, let's restart our server. I'm going to log out here. Also worth demonstrating here is the fact that now I've logged out, I still have access to the home page. So articles here and both lists. That is because I added visitor access to my home page. Okay, looks like we had a build failure. Let's just jump into our log here and see where that might have been. Okay, value too long for column summary. So let's just jump back into our build diagram. Back to my build, back to my entity diagram. Let's have a look at my summary. So my summary here is actually just set as a varchar. So that means I have a maximum length of 255 characters. Let me just update this to long text, same as my content, and rebuild. Awesome, so that's built now. So I'm going to jump back into my editor, jump back into my terminal, and do a pull. Awesome. Now let's rerun that and see if we have better luck this time. Beautiful. This is looking positive. Let's have a look. And we have data. Look at this. So now that we've got data in our UI, jumping back to GraphQL here, we should see 20 articles. Wonderful. As we add more articles, of course, being an API, this will be able to update as needed. What we can also do to explore this, let's have a look. Articles, where maybe you want to have a look at the title and summary only. And we can see a list of titles and summary from our API. Jumping back into our code, let's move on and actually start customizing our application. So first of all, you may have noticed before that our CRUD tiles are kind of boring and don't really suit the purpose. What we're going to do is create a couple of new components. The very first thing we're going to do is customize our collection component. Switching over to our client side, jumping inside of our source, app, lib, and components. So the components is actually a collection of components that are available out of the box to use. I'm going to be leveraging the CRUD component or the CRUD tile, which makes use of a couple of child components, one of which is the collection component here. First thing I'm going to create is a new folder. I'm going to call it article collection. Inside of this, I'm going to create two files. ATS file, and a HTML file. First of all, I'm going to add my template. And this is just using standard Angular templating. Jumping into here, I'm going to add my TS access. What you can see in here, we're actually extending the existing collection component. Moving over to the existing collection component, you see there's a variety of other files. We only want to change the list view. So switching over to the collection component here, we don't want to rewrite all of this functionality and logic. So we're going to just be extending it, adding a single new attribute we want to make use of, and then changing the HTML structure. Now that we've done this, this doesn't actually change anything. What we want to do is jump in and add it to our common component module. For this, we're going to be making use of some protected regions. Protected regions are tools that allow us to actually work with the bots without the bot overriding our changes every time we re-hit that build button. Let's turn one on here. So I've got article collection. Jumping back into here, this is the name of our class. We want to make sure it's part of our declarations. We also want to make sure it's exported. One thing to worry about here as well is to make sure that our imports are part of our protected region as well. Otherwise, we'll get compilation errors next time we hit the build button. And as you can see here, I've turned this on as well. So now that we've added that in, we still don't see any change because we're not actually making use of it. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be replacing our two components that we already have, our CRUD tiles for both featured and updated with this collection view. To find those, I'm going to be going into tiles. Outside of lib, I'm going to be going into tiles, CRUD. I'm going to be going into featured first, our list view, and our CRUD list component HTML. All I have to do here is turn this on. And change this to article collection. So article collection is using that component. And it's identified here by using this selector. Now let's switch this one on. Again, changing our protected region. We want to do it for our recently updated list, recently updated, and turn this on. Wonderful. Let's switch back to our application and have a look at what it looks like now. Completely different. So while this is still quite boring, we've got a lot of changes we yet to make, but you can see that we can easily drop in, replace any part of Codebots. The CRUD view is not. The defaults are very useful. And you'll notice if I log in now, the defaults are still present in the administration section. If I have a look at my article, the default is still present here. So my data management through this table interface doesn't change. I'm going to jump back into the front because this is mainly where I'm going to be customizing. Jumping back into and have a look at my code as well. So my next step is looking here, we've got article and article. These aren't really that useful. So I'm going to update these names. For that, I'm going to be jumping in and having a look at, again, the list view. So the list TS file. Given the fact I'm going to be editing things quite often, I'm going to pin this. Given the fact that's just HTML, again, I'm just going to jump into the actual HTML for my CRUD tar. Up here, we see article. On protected region, this one is in recently updated. Save that. Let's have a look at our featured articles. Same as before. On featured articles. And switch back over and have a look. And we've got updated headings. Okay, jumping back into the code. I now want to actually start adding some Markdown to my application. And to do that, I'm going to add a JavaScript dependency. So I'm going to stop serving my client-side application. I'm going to open up my package.json file. And inside of here, I'm going to be turning on a protected region for dependencies and add my dependency. For this example, we're going to be using the ngx Markdown library. Reinstall my app. Sorry, I moved that into dev dependencies. I want that in my actual application dependencies, so I'll move that along. Okay, beautiful. Now that's installed, I'm going to switch over and actually add it to my module. Down into here, turn on this protected region. And we've got our configuration, but you do notice we're missing a couple of imports here. So climbing up into the top here again, turn on our protected region. We import our module. So it looks like this hasn't actually installed properly. So let's have a look at again our package.json file. Close that down. Make sure we're opening the right one. Protected region back on. Add our dependency back in and reinstall. Okay, that's looking a little different now. We'll give it a moment to install. Now let's run the client again. So simply adding this dependency hasn't actually changed anything within our application. All it's done is provide us the option to actually be using this Markdown extension. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a new Markdown area component. So going back into my library here, components, I'm going to create a new folder again, Markdown area. Markdown area.component.ts. Oh, HTML. So first of all, we're looking at our actual Markdown area logic. And you can see here we've actually done a very similar thing to before and extended our text area component. And realistically, there's not a huge amount of difference between the text area component and our Markdown area. The primary difference comes down into our actual Markdown area component template. And you can see here, we're actually making use of the Markdown directive. For that to actually work, we want to, again, jump into our common component module and import our Markdown library. Wonderful. So Markdown module's in here now. Wait for that to reload, and let's switch back and have a look at our actual application here. Switch over, and we can see nothing's actually changed in here. The reason for that is while we may have overridden our list view, we haven't updated or overridden our actual view page at all. So now that's in, and we'll do that in a second. But the very first thing I think I will do now is delete and remove these buttons. Given the fact we don't want users to be able to edit or delete, our security model actually stops us if we're not logged in from doing this, but it will still display the buttons. So let's switch back over into some of our components here. So I'm going to close a few things down. Featured, articles, file, list, component. I'm going to pin this one, and I'm going to open up the recently updated list.ts. I'm going to pin this one as well. So inside of here, you'll notice that there's a collection of different features we can turn on and off. First thing we're going to do is change the actual name. So view, rather than being called view, we're going to call it see more. And we're going to do this for both files. And make sure to turn on your protected regions. I'm now going to scroll down and see what else I can customize in here. Item actions. So item actions is actually where we define the buttons. I'm going to turn on a bunch of protected regions and actually delete the buttons I do not want. Turn on the protected region and delete. Switching over into here as well. Item actions. Do the same again. And again, don't forget to turn on your protected regions, otherwise they'll just appear back again as soon as we rebuild. Let's switch across and have a look. Wonderful. So rather than having the 3 buttons, view, delete, and edit, we now have a single see more button now for both lists. Okie dokie. Now, problem is, if we click this button, it switches this same tile into a view mode. That is not how we want this. We want it to be on a completely separate page. So let's override that functionality. So on item clicked, let's change what happens when we click that button. So jump in here, turn on this protected region, delete the default behavior, and change it. So now we're actually dispatching a new routing event. So this will change the button to, when clicked, navigate to the article page wrapping tile using the specific ID of the article we want. It will then exit because we don't want to use any of the functionality found down here. I want to do that for both. Save that, switch back. Now when we click see more, let's see what happens. Okay, cool. So it's actually taken us to a page, but we're getting we're getting a 404. Let's see why that might be. Okay, looking at here, it is probably because our route is actually wrong. Jumping back into our build, let's see what we call things. In our interface, we called it articles. We didn't call it article. Articles. Articles. Jump over here and change it again. Save that. And switch back. No, still not liking that. Let's jump back in and see where those pages actually exist. Front end. We want to jump into our articles wrapping tile. View. What is different? Let me copy this route and let's have a look at the differences. Aha. We called it articles, not articles page. Simple mistake. Let's switch back and have a look again. Wonderful, it's now working. Again, we see we're using the same view before. This view is not our ultimate goal here because this is kind of boring and you can see it's not rendering the content correctly. Switching back to our code. Now we've done that, we actually want to probably create that custom article view page. Closing out our tiles, we want to jump back into our components. Looking at our components, there is a component in here called CRUD. Inside of here, we've got a create edit component. We're going to create a new one. and we're going to call it create edit articles. Similar as before, we're going to create 2 new files. We're going to call it CRUD article create edit component, following the naming conventions that we have set out already. CRUD beautiful. Jumping in here, we're going to add our template, which is over here. And our TypeScript file. Let's just make sure that everything is spelled right. No, we've named it wrong. Changing that again to articles. The naming of articles is really getting me here. Beautiful. Now we've saved that one. Again, we want to add it to our common component. So you're probably starting to see a pattern here. We'll add our Markdown component here if we didn't add, which we should have. And we'll also add our CRUD create edit component. CRUD article, sorry. Beautiful. Again, into an export. Lovely. Now we can actually make use of this. So to do so, very similar to before, we're going to be jumping into our featured articles and our recently updated article CRUD tiles. We've modified the list already. We're now going to modify the edit. Jumping into the HTML view here, again, turn on the protected region. Change this over here. What do we got? CRUD create edit article. And we'll do this for both. So the key differences between this CRUD create edit and the one that we did previously is simply the HTML structure. So we've simplified it. We've made it so you cannot edit anything in this view. And we've also added a little sidebar metadata block for details about it being featured, created, modified. Again, we're using our new component, our Markdown area component here, purely to change how it's displayed. So let's save this now, wait for it to reload, and switch over, and let's have a look at what we have. Looks like we haven't seen any difference here. So let's jump back into our code and see why that may be. Just for sanity checking, I'm going to restart my client side here. While this is reloading, let's check in to see how we're going on our backlog. So visitors you can read. Cool. Visitors can log in and read articles. We've already proven that can happen. Publishers can create, edit, update, delete. Well, we haven't seen them actually create and edit yet, so we'll move that into in progress. Articles can be searched. Again, haven't seen that yet, but what we're currently working on is articles can be written in Markdown, and we're also working on our recently updated and our featured articles list. Let's see if our client started. Wonderful. Do a hard refresh, and still nothing. We might jump in and have a look at why that might be in a moment. There we go. Just took a moment. Cool. We can see a lot going on here. So this looks like it's in the home tile. Refresh this. Let's have a look at articles. Let's switch over to here. So we won't see anything in here, but we might see something. Let's log out. Looks like we might have made a mistake here because it's rendering the Markdown on our featured articles list. Let's switch over and have a look at what that might be. Our article collection is all G. Create edit articles is all G. Let's have a look at our collection component and see why that might be different. Article collection, common component module. Okay, so what I suspect is happening here is our list is not being truncated at all. So let's switch back into here. So this content is actually rendering correctly, but it's just too big. So we're demonstrating everything. Looking back at our article collection that we just created, we are actually using our Markdown component. Beautiful. And this component isn't rendering just right yet. So what we need to do is we need to actually switch over. So the mistake we just made is we're reusing the wrong component. Jumping back into our tiles, featured articles, we're not actually using this edit. What we want to do is change the edit in the article tile. As always, don't forget to actually turn on your protected regions. Beautiful. Looks like we're getting somewhere now. Okay, so now we've got our Markdown actually rendering. We can actually jump back into our plan section and articles can be written in Markdown. That's done. Next up, we want to make sure that searches work. So that's focusing on articles can be searched. At the moment, we've got a search box up here. Given the fact that in our build diagram, we marked all of these attributes here as searchable, that should already work. Beautiful. Available documentation 10 is in the title. But what we want is on our homepage for search, which we currently don't have yet. So jumping back into our code, we are going to jump into first of all, our article tile. We will jump into our view tile. So CRUD, we've got a custom one in here, and that's pretty simple. The custom tile has a couple of wrapping tiles. We're going to be modifying our home wrapping tile, which details can be found in the home wrapping tile view. Jumping into here, we don't have much. So turning this on, home wrapping tile. Let's see if that's what we want. Nope. We're adding two components. This image header here, which is sourced from an image that I prepared earlier, and then our CB search component that we're going to be making use of here as part of our form. You will notice that this is saying can't bind placeholder. It's not actually correctly importing our CB search. So what we need to do is jumping into our module here and just make sure we've imported our common components module. Beautiful. Again, move this into our protected region. Make sure this one is on, and jumping back into our HTML, the only issue we have now is that the search method doesn't exist. So jumping down to component, let's set this up. Constructor. So first couple of things we're going to do is set up a router state. Add some imports. We've got a router state. We've got a constructor that declares our router state and injects our router state correctly. We also subscribe to our router state so that we can actually get some details out of it. Now that we've got the router set up in our home component, we want to actually make use of it in our search. What we're going to do here now is actually just add our search. Just hang tight there on that one. We want to actually implement our search method. So jumping back in here, let's see what that one is. On search event. Beautiful. There's our method. In this method, what we're doing is we're taking in an event, and then what we're triggering a dispatch for our router store. Again, you'll notice that article page and article page wrapping tile, same as before, are incorrect. So I'm going to update them now. So articles and articles. This will set a query parameter here that will be the search query itself, and that comes from our event here. Right now, this won't do anything because we haven't implemented our query parameter on our actual articles page. But let's just switch back and see what this tries to do. Waiting for this to build there. Bingo. Awesome. On our home page, we actually have a search bar now. Let's try to make use of this. Hello. You'll notice there's a query parameter up here called hello. We haven't changed anything in this view at all though, because we're not actually using that. So that's going to be our next step. Jumping back into the code. We're going to be looking at the article components. So again, going into app, tiles, CRUD, article. We want to do it on our list, article CRUD tile list component in here. Scrolling down, we want this on load to check to see if there's any actual query parameters. We're missing a couple of imports. Router state, import this right at the top. Again, make sure this is actually in a protected region. Get rid of our search text here. And what this will do is this will actually grab our query parameter. It'll trim it for white space, and then it'll run the existing on-collection search method that already works. So we're going to be just leveraging the existing CRUD search. Looks like we've got a little bit of an error here. That should be resolved after this build. Wait for that to be done. Awesome. Now you can see the search query. We actually have nothing here, but if we change this query again to what we searched for before, we'll notice that it works. We're now filtering by whatever we want to be putting in that search box. Going back to the home page, we can demonstrate this by hitting 10, bada bing, bada boom. Now that we've added search, we've added the component, we've got our markdown rendering, switching across into our plan here as well, articles can now be searched. Featured articles exist. They do exist. We haven't done anything with them, so I'll leave this in progress, and publishers can create. So I might just demonstrate this one so we can move it along. Logging back in. Going into the administration section, article, we want to create an article. So example article, we can create summaries. This is called content. We'll mark this one as featured. We'll hit save. So we've now created this. Going back into the front, you'll notice that pops up. Wonderful. Jump in, we can view it. Also using our existing audit functionality that's available out of Springbot, we can see who created it and who changed it. So now I've created this, I'm actually going to jump in there and change it to demonstrate the audit functionality further. Open that up. Save that. Over here, refresh. We now can see that I've changed the content. Moving this one along. Now, what we want to do, final parts, is we want to make it a little bit prettier. We want to make sure that our featured articles and our updated articles actually work as expected. And then we can call it done. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in there and tweak some of the styling, make it look a little bit prettier. So to do that, I'm going to jump back into the code here. Inside my client side, jump into my lib directory, my SCSS, my front, because that's where I'm changing things, pages, and I want to create a couple of new pages. Home page. And I also want to create article page.scss. Home page is going to have a little bit of CSS in here that pretty much just grids it out. So we've got a logo, we've got our search, and we've got our featured, and you can see how that gets laid out here. We're also controlling the alignment and width in a couple of places, but we're not doing anything too crazy there. So feel free to, after this, experiment with your own styling wizardry to expand that even further. Our article page is going to be more of the same. Some padding, some grid layouts, and some widths. Now we've added those, they don't actually do anything. First of all, we need to actually import them. So jumping into import pages here, turn on a protected region. I want to import articles page and home page. Wait for that to build and I'll switch over and have a look at this end result. Wonderful. So it looks like we've got some of this here. So now you can actually see the search bar is a little bit more centered, featured article cleaned up a little bit here. These are still really big, so I'm going to switch over and make some more tweaks. So jumping back into our collection, article collection component, HTML. I'm going to actually turn off the Markdown functionality here. The problem that's been rendered so deeply is because we're actually showing everything. I believe that should about do it. Awesome. Actually, not quite yet. I might explore that one in just one moment. Final thing I probably want to do is actually make those lists actually be sorted. So going back, I think we pinned these earlier. Close this one, close all the other ones we've made changes in so far. And we want to go back into our featured articles and recently updated article component. So to make these work, first of all, I'm looking at my featured article. I want to add a filter to my featured article. The first thing I need to do to my featured article to add that filter is override my default wheres. To do that, I just jump in here, turn on this protected region, add in a new where. So operation, fairly straightforward. The operation is going to be equal. This is leveraging our GraphQL API here. Path is going to be featured. which was the property we added to our model before. And then finally, the value is going to be true. So we only want things that have the value true. Looking at our recently updated ones here, we don't actually want to add a filter here, but we want to change the sorting. So we jump in and actually have a look at our order by. So by default, everything's ordered by created. We probably want to order by modified. To find out what's available for these sorts and searching, we can actually just jump in and have a look at some of the functionality we've added before. So if we look at our article model, we can see the properties that are actually available. So title, summary, content, and featured. While I'm here, I'm actually going to add an additional little filter on top. Actually, article model. I'm going to add a little feature on top. So this feature is going to be limiting the columns that are actually shown. And this might actually fix our problem from before. So jumping into this protector region down the bottom, I'm going to add a little static method that returns an array of the attributes I actually want to show. So title and summary, I've shown up here. So title, summary, content, featured, we only care about these ones. Jumping back in here, we want to override our header options. So looking at our options, it returns a set of, so looking at our model properties here, it returns a set of header option with additional filters. We're just going to override this. The only changes that have actually been made here is we're now using our article model get display attributes as part of our filter. So if it matches these, beautiful. If it doesn't, we don't show it. Jumping into header options over here, I'll do exactly the same thing. Clean that up a little bit. Turn it on. Let's see what that looks like once it builds. I'm just refreshing now. Let's see where we land. That's more like it. So what we can actually see here now is we've got two lists. We've got our recently updated and our featured articles. Changes here, that could be quite simple to clean this up, is just some minor styling improvements. Having a look at what we've got here. I believe changing of widths would clean this up, but clicking through, we can actually see demonstratively that some of these things have been sorted correctly. So featured, let's have a look. It is featured, awesome. Let's change this article in our administration section so it's no longer featured, and let's see that update. No longer featured. We'll go back. We'll refresh. Make sure our data's nice and fresh. Looks like that's not actually working. So what that probably means, switch back over to our code. Let's have a look at our article controller on the server side. So scrolling down, we want to have a look at our predicate. Sorry, article service. Let's have a look at our predicate process condition. So we've got created, modified, title, summary, and content. It looks like we do actually have featured here. Let's have an article service. Yeah, this is the one we want. Process condition. We don't have featured, and that's our problem. So let's jump back into our model. Having a look here, we want to mark this as searchable. Rebuild. Awesome. That's still going, I believe. Let's wait for that to be done. While we're waiting for this, we might have a look at our styling. Go home, page SCSS. The problem we have is probably because our components are too wide. So let's look at our collection component. Collection component. Let's see if we can make some more room here. Where are we at with the build? Beautiful. Okay, so that's all built. Let's jump back to our source code. And let's have a look at our article service again. Process condition, down here, we now have featured. So if we restart our server, that should be started in a moment. Looking good. Wait for this to reload. Awesome. So the filtering is now working. Let's change this so it's no longer verified. So featured, available documentation 18. Jump into our admin section. Look at our articles. Find 18. Edit. No longer featured. Save. Authorization failed. Looks like I need to log out and log back in again because I restarted my server. Beautiful. Go back into here. Change it from featured. Bingo. I've re-authenticated. Log back in. Refresh this page here. It's now false. Let's go back home. And it's no longer there. Logging out and having a look at our home page as well. We can see we can still access everything, but we can no longer access, we cannot log in and access the admin section because we were not given permission to do so. It prompts us with a login. Well, that about brings us to the end of what we were hoping to get done today. So feature articles are now marked as done. We can now list featured articles and change them as needed, mark them as featured or otherwise. Recently updated, we've done the same. Looking at our list here, those articles we just changed, looking at our recently updated article list, you can see they appear right at the very top as you would expect. Jumping back to our code, in summary of what we've actually done today, we've created, looking at our thing here, we've created 3 new components. So we've created a Markdown area, article collection, and article create edit. And those have been completely replacing the existing functionality of the collection view and the create edit view. In addition to that, we've added a Markdown library and a Markdown component. that we've leveraged in both of those replacement components. We've added some really basic styles that override the default styles of the application, as well as made some minor tweaks to the components themselves to have a completely different experience for the CRUD tile. Hopefully today you've seen how we can use the existing behaviors, components, and functionality provided by out-of-the-box Codebots application to really make great differences very, very quickly. Thank you very much for your time today. Have a fantastic one.